Stop right now. Do not take your car down to that local quickie lube place and pay $75, $100, $125 even for an oil change at some places. That's crazy. Let me show you over the next few minutes how to change your oil all by yourself. Yes, you can do it. It's not that bad. So come along. Let me show you how easy it really is. To do your own oil, you're going to need some supplies. And some of them you're going to have to buy, but that's okay because you're going to use them over and over again and save a ton of money in the process. Of course, you're going to need oil and an oil filter that fits your vehicle. And I'll show you how to look up which oil and oil filter and how much oil that your particular car takes before you go to the store and buy it. You're going to need a drain pan of some kind. I really like these big ones. Lots of surface area for the old oil to splash into and not have to worry about it getting all over your floor. I especially like these kind that have a cap on them so that once you've drained the oil, you can also drain this into a container and take it somewhere to dispose of that oil properly. You're going to need a funnel of some kind as well because the area that you're going to put the new oil into your engine is usually only about that big around, and you can imagine pouring something like this into that little bit of a space can be kind of hard. So you take that funnel and you put it in there in that hole, and now you've got a much larger surface area to pour into, and again, less likely to make a mess. One of the other things that I really recommend you have on hand is a bunch of shop rags, because as careful as we may be, we're going to make a mess in some way. It's going to be on your hands. It might splash on the ground, and you want to be able to clean that up. I like these shop rags that come in these boxes especially. You can pull them out, tear one off, wipe up, throw it away. Real easy. Keep your work area clean and your hands and everything else clean. Along those lines, you can see that I'm almost always wearing these nitrile gloves. And I especially like these bright colored ones like green or orange. I don't like the black ones. The reason I don't like the black ones is because when you get grease on a black glove, you can't see it because it's black on black. But when you get grease on these green or these orange gloves, it stands out and you know, hey, I need to clean that off before I go touching on somebody's car or some of my clothes or grab my phone or whatever. So go for these green or orange gloves instead of the black ones, and you'll thank me later. The other thing that you want to look for when you're looking at gloves is get some that are thicker than usual. These are 8 mil thick, and what that means is that they're really tough. They're not going to tear on you. Now, if you get the cheap ones, they make them out of 3-4 mil thickness of nitrile, and it seems like everything you touch will rip one off. And so you think you're saving money by getting those cheaper ones, but you end up going through 4 or 5 different pairs in the same amount of time as you'll go through one pair of these thicker ones. So highly recommend the thicker ones. I'll put a link down in the description to these sort of products, and you can find them on Amazon. You can get them on at Walmart or at the auto parts store. So where you want to go to figure out what kind of oil and how much your car takes is usually going to be in your owner's manual, which, if you're lucky, is still inside the glove box of the car. Once you have your owner's manual out, you want to flip to the back to the index and look where it says oil for the engine, page 380. Okay, so let's go to page 380. Here we go. Engine oil. It says how to check the oil, and it says if you need to see the capacities, how much it takes, see page 498. It also tells you here that it takes 5W30, and notice on the second page here it also says again 5W30. But let's see, for the capacity we need page 498. So if we come over to page 498 here, it says capacities and specifications for this vehicle, and come down to engine oil,
And this has a 3.6 V6 in it, and it says it takes 6 quarts of oil. So now we know what kind of oil and how much oil to get.
Most cars will tell you the type of oil that they require right here on the oil filler cap. This says 5W30, and notice also it says Mobile 1. Now you don't have to get Mobile, but Mobile 1's a synthetic oil, and so it's calling for a 5W30 synthetic oil. So make sure that you get the oil your car calls for. Okay, so how do we find the oil and oil filter that we need for our vehicle the quick and easy way? Well, I like to go to rockauto.com. No, they're not a sponsor. If they would like to be, hey, I'm all on board. But I found that Rock Auto does a really good job of breaking out exactly the parts you need, and they show a picture of the actual part so that you can match it up to what you're looking at. So let's go and see what oil and filter I need for my Cadillac. So we'll scroll down here, the different makers of vehicles, and we'll go to Cadillac. It's a 2007 STS model. You notice how it's opening up all of these menus. It has the 3.6 V6, so we'll click on that. Now it shows you all of the different systems inside the car, and we're looking at the engine, so we're going to go to the engine for engine oil. Scroll down our list, and you'll see here oil, and down here oil filter. They have a little star next to them because this is a common area for people to search. I'm going to go into oil. Here's where you see all of the different oils that are available through Rock Auto for your car. And note that they are all 5W30 because Rock Auto knows that your car, this particular car, takes 5W30. So that's how you know what oil you need. Now remember, we looked inside of the owner's manual to find the volume of oil that was required. In that case, it was 6 quarts. So you can buy here by the quart, or they also sell these jugs that are 5 quarts at a time. So in this case, you might want to get a jug and a quart or two, or maybe 2 jugs. But you can see that the prices will vary over here for the different types of oil, and you can choose synthetic or non-synthetic, whichever you prefer. I personally prefer synthetic. Now for the oil filter, we'll come down to the oil filter pull-down menu, and it'll open up all of the different options that it has for oil filters. And again, it'll show you the pictures of those filters. That way you can see and match up to what you need. I happen to know that Walmart carries the Fram brand of oil filters. And so here you can see that you have the Fram CH8765 that matches the vehicle. So I can just go to my local Walmart and not wait on the shipping and buy this part. So that's how you know what oil and what filter to get for your vehicle. Okay, there is another option for getting your oil and filter. You don't have to look it up or anything. You can go to your local auto parts store and they'll look it up for you, and they'll sell you the oil and the oil filter. You will have to pay a little bit more for that service than if you go get it yourself from, say, Walmart or Rock Auto or whatever, but at least you don't have to go do all that research on your own.
A little trick that I recommend is after you've looked up what kind of oil, how much oil, and what filter is necessary for your car, write it down and put it somewhere where you'll be able to find it again really easily so that you don't have to go through all of this hassle next time. Once you know which kind of oil you need, you can go to Walmart and get it just as cheaply as possible. I like to get this full synthetic here, so I need a jug of this 0W20, and I also need a jug of this 5W30. Now let's go see where the filters are. And here's the oil filter aisle, and if you're lucky, the oil filter catalog will be as torn up as this one. But I've already looked up which oil filter that I need, and I'll show you how to do that. I need a 10358, and so typically they'll have them organized with a number there going up, and so we're looking for a 10358. So there's 10358. Now this Fram is an okay brand name, but you know, the Walmart brand, which they call SuperTech down here, is actually ranked even better, and it's a little bit cheaper usually. So here's a 10358 for the Walmart brand, and so that's what I'm going to grab.
Okay, now that we've got all our supplies, it's finally time to go change the oil. So come over here to the car, and let's get it up in the air, get underneath there, and get that old oil out, put some fresh stuff in.
To raise the car up so that you can get under the front of the engine to get the oil out, you can use something like these ramps to drive the front of the car up onto, or you can jack the car up as normal. I'm using this quick jack here just because I have this available to me, but you can use a jack, and jack stands just the same. Here we are down underneath the car. This is the bottom of the engine, the oil pan right here, and it holds all of the oil. And somewhere on this pan you'll find a drain plug. This one happens to be a 13 millimeter, and so you find the right size wrench and put it on there and break it loose. Once you've got it loose, these drain plugs will typically be finger tight, so you can remove it just with your finger pressure. So I like to keep pushing on the plug while I unscrew it so that it doesn't shoot out of here and make a big mess. I've got the pan on the ground. There's going to be about 5 quarts or so of oil behind this plug, and it's going to want to push that oil out in an arc, and that arc's going to come down, and you want to make sure that you put your pan in a place where it's going to catch that arc of oil as it comes out, and then also anything that drips straight down. I'm pushing on it to hold it in place while I back it out so that it doesn't come gushing out. Here it comes, starting to leak by the threads, and there we go. Here comes the old oil, and you see that arc that it's making. Let me move you around here to the side so that you can see that a little better. Okay, it's been about 2 or 3 minutes or so, and as you can see, the majority of the oil has drained out of the oil pan. We're left with this real fine stream, and you know, an oil pan will drip like this for probably 30 minutes, and it's really not that important. You don't have to get every last ooey gooey drop out, so it's okay to go ahead and put the oil plug back in at this point and fill it up with fresh oil. I'm going to put this plug in here, trying to keep my hand over out of the way of the stream of oil while I put it back in, just to keep clean. Always want to get these things started by hand, not with a machine. That way they don't get cross-threaded. Then you can get your wrench, wipe up the area, get all the drips that came out while it was draining. Put your wrench on there, and you want to get this tight, but not gorilla tight. You just got to get it to a point where it's good and tight. There we go. All right, clean up any last drips, and we are done draining the old oil. And now it's time to go and put the new, or change the filter. Many of the cars will oil filter will be down here along the side of the oil pan on the bottom of the engine someplace. So look around to see where that's located for your car. This particular car doesn't have one down here. It's located up top. And so once we've drained the oil down here, we are done under the car. We can go up top, and I'll show you how to remove that oil filter. As I mentioned, this car and a lot of them nowadays have the oil filter accessible from above. This one happens to be under this canister cover right here. And so I'm going to go ahead and remove that and remove the oil filter and show you how to do the change there. So now we're going to remove the oil filter. I put this 24 millimeter socket on top, broke it loose, and loosen it up. Now this will unscrew by hand. And get a rag here in case I make any messes. The filter is going to remain stuck in the cap as I pull it up, and I'm going to let it sit here and drain for a minute. As you can see, there's quite a bit of oil trapped in that filter. And you can just let this drain here for a minute, or you can quickly move it across and put it in the oil pan. I'm going to try and capture some of the last drippings here so that I don't make a mess on this engine cover here. And I'll go ahead and take this over to the oil pan. So I've moved this housing over here to the oil pan to let it drain for a little bit. And now let's take this filter out of it. All you do is just pull on it and it unsnaps from inside the cap. And you want to make sure that you note which way it goes in and out of that cap. There sometimes is a difference in one end versus the other. This one is the same on both ends. It's just that the rubber gasket stayed stuck inside of that cap. You need to be careful of that. One thing that you can do is compare the old gasket to the old filter to the new filter. So the new filter has a gasket on both sides. The old one should have a gasket on both sides. If it doesn't, then it was probably lost inside of that cap, like this one was, stuck inside of there. And we need to be sure that the two, the new and the old, match up. So to put the new one on, all you do is take a little bit of oil and lubricate the gasket like so, and then you just push it inside and you'll feel it kind of snap in place and it'll kind of hold itself there. Also notice that here around the housing you have an O-ring for sealing the oil, and it's important that we replace that with the new one that'll come inside of the oil filter kit. All right, let's go ahead and get this O-ring out of the bag here. We'll set it aside for a moment. And let's remove the old O-ring from the cap. You can get some sort of a pick underneath it, a little screwdriver or something like that, and just kind of pull it out of that groove. Roll it around like so, and it'll come out of that groove so that you can put the new one in there. Just take your new one, put a little bit of oil on it, and then you can slide it down over the threads, work it down a little bit at a time until it goes back in the groove where the old one went. You want to make sure that that groove that the old one was in doesn't have any trash in it. If it does, clean it out before you put this new O-ring there, or else it won't seal here. You don't want this to not seal, then oil will leak all over the place. All right, so now we've got a new filter, we've got a new O-ring. This is ready to go back on the vehicle. Okay, so we have the filter in place, O-ring in place. We can go ahead and put this filter back inside the housing. We'll get her started here by hand. The threads engage, and then it'll get tight here as the O-ring starts to touch the housing. So we can look at this cap here, and it'll tell you what torque setting to use. It says 25 Nm. The Nm stands for Newton meters, and you can convert that to foot-pounds if you'd like. But really, with something like this, they've got a cap and a housing there have a gap between them, and once that gap is closed, that will pretty much be tight as it needs to be. So we'll go ahead and start tightening this, and you'll feel a little bit of resistance here as that O-ring starts to compress into the housing. Oh, and it stopped right there. Once it stops, that's pretty much as tight as it needs to be. You don't want to go too tight on that. And you'll see that the gap between that cap and there, it's come completely closed, and you know you're good to go. Here's an example of a vehicle that's got your oil drain plug down here on the bottom of the pan, just like
usual. And the oil filter, as I mentioned, will be on the side of the engine someplace. Here's the one for this vehicle. This is what the oil filter looks like on most vehicles when you unscrew them from the side of the engine block. There'll be some threads that it screws onto it, and then there'll be a rubber gasket around the edge. Make sure that this gasket came off, this black gasket, with the old filter, because your new filter will have a new gasket. And before you put the new filter in place, which it just screws back in place like this, before you put it in place, make sure to rub a little fresh oil on this O-ring so that it seats really smoothly, okay? Whenever you put this new filter in place, you want to screw it on and then just hand tighten it. Whenever it gets snug, give it as much of a tightening as your hand will allow. That's as tight as you want to put an oil filter on an engine. You don't want to use any kind of tool to tighten it onto the engine. Now it's time to fill her back up with oil. Now remember, we looked inside of our owner's manual. It said it takes 6 quarts. So you take the filler cap off, set that to the side, and you're going to want to put a funnel in here because it's going to be hard to pour all that oil just in this little hole usually. So I like to use a nice big funnel. That way we're not worried about it spilling all over the place. Just open up the jug of oil. Now this jug is 5 quarts, so we're going to have to put 1 more quart in addition to this. Go ahead and get our funnel out of the way. Put a little rag underneath it to catch any drips, and don't forget to put your cap back on nice and tight. That way everything is ready to go. Now that it's filled back up with oil, you want to check the dipstick and see what the level looks like. First time you pull a dipstick out, you always want to wipe it off, because whatever reading is on that dipstick is going to be a false one because of the oil just slinging around in the engine or running down it, in the case of us filling it back up just now. So then we'll stick it back all the way down in there, pull it back out. Now you can read it. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Let's see if I can get you to where you can see. All right, now it looks right about here, which is almost a little overfull, which is just about right, because remember, there's a lot of nooks and crannies inside this engine that have not got oil circulated to them yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the car just for a second to let it kind of move that oil around and fill up all those nooks and crannies, including the oil filter. And then we'll shut her down. We'll let it rest for a minute so that the oil can all settle back down into the oil pan, and then we'll check that oil dipstick again and make sure that we've got good level before we say we're done. So we ran the engine for about 10 seconds to let all the oil get in all and fill up all the nooks and crannies. And so now we're going to check the oil after we let it sit for about 10 minutes so that all the oil ran back down in the oil pan. So we wipe off the stick first, put her back in all the way to the bottom. Now we can read it. See what it says. All right, let's see if I can get you in here. And it may or may not come in focus for you. Let's see. There we go. Right there in the middle of the hash marks, which is right where we want to be. So we are good to go. After you're done, you want to take and dispose of your oil properly. So one reason I like this kind of drain pan is it makes it really easy to pour it into a container. One of the best containers to use is the jug that you just emptied. Just fill that up with your used oil, and then you can take the oil down to your local auto parts store. A lot of times they'll take it and dispose of it for you. You could take it to Walmart, or you could take it, a lot of neighborhoods, trash service will pick these up. So just make sure you dispose of it properly. You see, I told you you could do it. Changing your oil is not that bad. At least now, if you don't decide you want to do it on your own, you know what's involved and you know what you're paying someone else to do for you. I hope you had fun today. I sure did. And I hope that you check out our other episodes in this Dad's Lesson series. I'll put a link up here in the corner. We really appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you so much, and God bless.